I said step out! Now! Keep your hands where I can see them.
Patrolman, I am Federal Agent Alan Brooks. My ID is in my jacket pocket.
I do not care. You are detained. You are refusing my direct orders.
You are making a catastrophic mistake, officer.
This officer made the worst mistake of his career when he refused to let a federal agent prove who he was. It happened on a quiet Thursday morning in Sterling, Michigan. A routine day that would end with a badge stripped, a career destroyed, and a prison sentence handed down. All because one man let his assumptions override the law. Before we continue, let me take this opportunity to thank you so much for supporting our channel. Just choosing to watch our video means a lot to us. Before we go any further, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this is your first time here. Patrolman Vincent Reid had been working the streets of Sterling for 7 years. In that time, he'd racked up 10 formal complaints. Most of them had one thing in common: aggressive, questionable traffic stops. But Reid was still on the force, still wearing the badge, still making decisions that would eventually catch up with him. On this particular morning, Reid was patrolling a wealthy residential neighborhood on the north side of town. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, the kind of place where people drive luxury cars and mind their own business. That's when he spotted the dark gray sedan. The car wasn't speeding, it wasn't weaving, the driver wasn't on his phone. There was absolutely nothing wrong, but Reid noticed it anyway. He noticed because something felt off to him. The driver didn't look like he belonged in this neighborhood. At least, that's what Reid told himself. So, he followed. For 6 blocks, Reid tailed the sedan, waiting for something, anything, to justify pulling it over. And then he saw it. The tire. It grazed the white lane marker for maybe half a second. Barely noticeable. Definitely not dangerous. But it was enough. Reid hit his lights. The sedan pulled over immediately. No hesitation, no attempt to flee. Just a calm, lawful stop on the side of the road. Inside that car was Alan Brooks. Brooks wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a threat. He was a decorated field operative with the Federal Protection Agency, a branch most people have never even heard of. He'd spent years protecting federal assets, conducting sensitive operations, and upholding the law at the highest level. But Reid didn't know that. And worse, he didn't care to find out. Brooks rolled down his window, hands clearly visible on the steering wheel. It's something he'd been trained to do. Keep your hands where they can see them. Stay calm. Be respectful. Let the situation de-escalate naturally. Reid walked up to the window, and his first words weren't about a license or registration. They weren't about the lane marker. He wanted to know why Brooks was there, as if being in that neighborhood required an explanation. Brooks stayed calm. He dealt with tense situations before. He knew how to handle this. "Officer, I'm a federal agent with the FPA. My credentials are in my jacket pocket. May I reach for them?" It was textbook. Identify yourself, ask permission, keep everything transparent. Reid's response was immediate and cold. "No. Step out of the vehicle." Brooks blinked. "Sir, I just need to show you my—" "I said step out of the vehicle, now!" This was the moment, the exact moment where Vincent Reid made the choice that would destroy his life. He refused to let a federal officer prove who he was. He refused to follow basic protocol. He refused to de-escalate. And Alan Brooks, despite being a federal agent with more authority than Reid could comprehend, complied. Because that's what trained professionals do. They don't escalate. They don't make things worse. Brooks stepped out of the car, hands still visible, movements slow and deliberate. Reid's hand hovered near his sidearm, his body language tense and aggressive. This wasn't a traffic stop anymore. This was something else entirely. Across the street, a neighbor named Margaret Halford watched from her front porch. She'd lived in Sterling her whole life. She knew what a bad stop looked like. And this was a bad stop.
She pulled out her phone and hit record. Do you think Brooks should have been more forceful about showing his ID, or was staying calm the right move? Drop your thoughts below. Brooks stood beside his vehicle, hands at his sides, doing everything right. But Reid wasn't interested in doing things right. He was interested in proving a point. Put your hands on the hood, Reid ordered. Brooks hesitated for just a second. Officer, I'm telling you, I'm a federal agent. My badge is in my jacket. If you just let me, hands on the hood, now. Brooks complied, again, because escalating this situation would only make it worse. But inside, he knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't about a lane marker. This wasn't even about procedure. This was about control. Reid began patting him down, roughly, more aggressive than necessary. Brooks didn't resist, didn't complain, just stood there, letting it happen, knowing that every second of this was being recorded by Reid's own body camera and by Margaret Halford across the street. 2 minutes later, a second patrol car pulled up. Officers Lena Chen and Miguel Diaz stepped out. Chen had 12 years on the force. Diaz had 8. Both of them took one look at the scene and immediately knew something was wrong. Chen approached Reid. What's the stop for? Lane violation, Reid said, not looking at her. Chen glanced at Brooks, then back at Reid. Did you run his plates? Didn't need to. Did you ask for his license? Reid didn't answer. Diaz walked over to Brooks. His tone was different, calmer, professional. Sir, can you tell me your name? Brooks looked him straight in the eye. Alan Brooks, Federal Protection Agency, badge number 7249 Delta. My credentials are in my jacket pocket inside the vehicle. I've been asking Officer Reid to let me retrieve them for the past 5 minutes. Diaz's expression shifted. He turned to Chen. She was already looking at Reid. You didn't let him show you his ID? Reid's jaw tightened. I'm conducting a lawful stop. That's not what I asked. Brooks spoke up, his voice still calm, but firmer now. Officer Chen, I did not give consent for any search of my vehicle. I've clearly identified myself and requested to show my federal credentials. This stop has no legal basis. Chen stepped closer to Reid. Vincent, let him get his ID, right now. Reid ignored her. He walked to the driver's side door of Brooks' sedan and opened it. Officer Reid, I do not consent to this search, Brooks said loudly, clearly, for the cameras. Reid reached into the car anyway. Diaz muttered under his breath, This is bad. Margaret Halford, still filming from across the street, zoomed in. She could see everything, the illegal search, the federal agent standing helpless, the 2 backup officers trying to stop their colleague from making the worst decision of his life. Reid pulled open the glove compartment. Nothing. He checked under the seat. Nothing. Then he reached for the jacket on the passenger seat, the one Brooks had mentioned from the beginning. He pulled it toward him and felt the weight in the pocket. His fingers closed around something hard, metallic, official. He pulled it out. It was a badge. Not a regular badge, a federal badge. Gold, engraved, the kind that carries weight in every courthouse, every precinct, every government building in the country. Reid stared at it. Beneath the badge was an ID card. Alan Brooks, Federal Protection Agency, field operative, security clearance level 4. Chen walked over and looked at it. Her face went pale. Vincent, you just illegally searched a federal agent.
Reid didn't move. He was still holding the badge, staring at it like it might disappear if he looked away. Brooks stepped forward. I'll need that back, officer. Reid handed it over, his hand shaking slightly. Brooks took the badge, slipped it back into his jacket, and put the jacket on. Then he looked at all three officers. "I'm going to file a formal complaint," Brooks said. "This stop was unlawful. The search was illegal, and every second of it is on camera." Chen nodded. "You have every right to do that, Agent Brooks. I'm sorry this happened." Diaz handed Brooks a card with the precinct's information. "You'll want to contact our Internal Affairs Division. I'll be filing a report as well." Reid still hadn't said a word. Brooks got back in his car, started the engine, and drove away. Slowly, calmly, legally. The moment he was gone, Chen turned to Reid. "What the hell were you thinking?" Reid finally looked at her. "I didn't know. He told you multiple times, and you refused to let him prove it." Margaret Halford stopped recording. She had 12 minutes of footage. 12 minutes of a federal agent being detained, searched, and humiliated for no reason other than driving through the wrong neighborhood. She uploaded it that night. By morning, it had 50,000 views. By the end of the week, it had gone viral. Would you have uploaded that video if you were the neighbor? Let us know in the comments. The video hit the internet like a bomb. Within 72 hours, it had been shared across every major platform: Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, TikTok. News outlets picked it up, civil rights organizations flagged it, legal analysts broke it down frame by frame, and every single one of them reached the same conclusion. This was a textbook case of an illegal stop and search. The Sterling Police Department's phone lines lit up. Hundreds of calls. Emails flooded the chief's inbox. Protesters gathered outside the precinct by Saturday morning, holding signs that read, "Badge doesn't mean above the law," and "Justice for Agent Brooks." Inside the precinct, Chief Raymond Kolb sat in his office, watching the video for the 7th time. Each viewing made it worse. He could see Reid's aggression. He could hear Brooks' calm, repeated requests to show his credentials. He could see the moment Reid opened that car door without consent. And he could see his department's reputation crumbling in real time. Kolb called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. Officers Chen and Diaz were there, so was the department's legal counsel, Patricia Voss. "Tell me there's another angle to this." Voss shook her head. "There isn't. Reid's body cam confirms everything in the civilian video. He initiated a stop without reasonable suspicion. He refused to allow Agent Brooks to identify himself. He conducted a search without consent or probable cause. And he did all of this to a federal officer. What's our exposure? Civil suit, criminal charges, federal investigation. Take your pick." Chen leaned forward. "Chief, I was there. I tried to stop him. Diaz tried to stop him. Reid wouldn't listen. He was determined to search that car no matter what." Kolb looked at Diaz. "You agree?" "Yes, sir. Agent Brooks was cooperative the entire time. He identified himself clearly. He asked permission to retrieve his credentials. Reid shut him down and escalated without cause." Kolb rubbed his temples. "Where's Reid now?" "On administrative leave as of this morning," Voss said. "But Chief, that's not going to be enough. The Department of Justice is already looking at this. I got a call an hour ago. They're opening a civil rights investigation." The room went quiet. A DOJ investigation wasn't just serious. It was career-ending, department-ending if they found a pattern of misconduct. And with Reid's 10 prior complaints, there was definitely a pattern. "Terminate him," Kolb said.
Voss nodded. "I'll start the paperwork. And contact Agent Brooks directly. Apologize on behalf of the department. Offer full cooperation with any investigation he wants to pursue." Chen spoke up. "Chief, for what it's worth, Brooks handled this better than most people would have. He stayed calm, he didn't escalate,
He did everything right.
That's exactly why this is so damning, Kolb said. Because it shows that even when you do everything right, Reid still violated the law. Across town, Alan Brooks sat in his living room, watching the same video on his laptop. He'd received dozens of calls, from colleagues, from friends, from attorneys offering to represent him, from journalists wanting interviews. He'd declined most of them. This wasn't about fame. This wasn't about revenge. This was about accountability. His phone buzzed. It was his supervisor at the FPA, Director Carson Mitchell. "Alan, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine, sir. Just watching this thing blow up." "The Bureau of Justice called me this morning. They want your full statement. They're treating this as a potential civil rights violation." Brooks nodded, even though Mitchell couldn't see him. "I'll cooperate fully." "Good. And Alan, I'm proud of how you handled this. You kept your cool. You protected yourself legally. You did everything by the book." "I did what I was trained to do." "Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have escalated. You didn't. That's why this video is so powerful. It shows exactly what happens when bias overrides the law." After the call ended, Brooks closed his laptop. He thought about that morning, the moment Reid refused to let him show his badge, the moment he realized this officer had already made up his mind about who Brooks was and what he deserved. He thought about all the times this probably happened to people who weren't federal agents, people who didn't have badges, people who didn't have the training to stay calm, people who didn't have the legal protection he had. And he realized this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about everyone Reid had pulled over in the past 7 years, everyone he'd intimidated, everyone he'd searched without cause, everyone who didn't have a camera recording. The DOJ investigation started on Monday. By Wednesday, Reid had been formally terminated. By Friday, federal prosecutors had filed charges. What do you think should happen to officers who abuse their power like this? Drop your answer below. The Department of Justice doesn't move quickly, but when they move with precision. Senior investigator Rachel Nune was assigned to the Brooks case within 48 hours of the video going viral. She'd spent 15 years investigating civil rights violations, police misconduct, and abuse of authority. She'd seen bad cops before, but something about the Reid case stood out. It wasn't just the illegal stop. It wasn't just the unlawful search. It was the complete disregard for procedure, for the law, for basic human decency. Nune started with the videos, the civilian footage from Margaret Halford, Reid's body camera, the dash cam from his patrol car, Chen's body camera, Diaz's body camera. 5 different angles, all telling the same story. Then she pulled Reid's service record. 10 complaints in 7 years. 3 involved excessive force during traffic stops. 4 involved unlawful searches. 2 involved racial profiling allegations. 1 involved threatening behavior toward a detained individual. Every single complaint had been investigated internally. Every single one had resulted in either a warning or a short suspension. Nothing more. Nune made a note. Pattern of behavior, inadequate departmental response. She interviewed Officer Chen first. "When you arrived on scene, what did you observe?" Nune asked. Chen sat across from her in a small conference room at the Federal Building. Agent Brooks was out of his vehicle, hands visible, clearly cooperating. Reid was aggressive, tense. I could tell immediately something was wrong.
Did you ask Reid about the stop? Yes, he said it was a lane violation, but when I asked if he'd checked the driver's ID, he avoided the question. What happened next? Brooks identified himself to Officer Diaz, gave his name, badge number, agency. He said his credentials were in his jacket and that Reid had refused to let him retrieve them. How did Reid react when you questioned him? Chen paused. He ignored me. He went straight to the car and searched it anyway. Brooks explicitly stated he didn't consent. Reid did it anyway.
Did you try to stop him?
Yes. I told him to let Brooks show his ID. He wouldn't listen.
Nguyen made another note. Then she interviewed Diaz. His account matched Chen's exactly. Then she interviewed Margaret Halford, the neighbor who recorded the video. "Why did you start filming?" Nguyen asked. Margaret was in her 60s, a retired school teacher with silver hair and kind eyes. "Because I've lived in Sterling my whole life. I know what a bad stop looks like, and that was a bad stop." "What made you think that?" "The officer's body language. He was aggressive from the start, and the driver was doing everything right. He wasn't argumentative, he wasn't resistive, he was calm, and the officer still treated him like a criminal." "Did you hear what they were saying?" "Some of it. I heard the driver say he was a federal agent. I heard him ask to show his credentials, and I heard the officer refuse." Nguyen nodded. "Why did you upload the video?" Margaret looked at her directly. "Because if I didn't, who would believe him? It would have been his word against the officer's, and we both know how that usually ends." 2 weeks into the investigation, Nguyen interviewed Alan Brooks. They met at the FPA field office in Detroit. Brooks arrived in a suit, professional and composed. He walked Nguyen through the entire encounter, minute by minute. "When Officer Reid asked what I was doing in that neighborhood, I knew immediately this wasn't a standard stop. That's not a question you ask someone who's committed a traffic violation. That's a question you ask someone you've already profiled." "Why didn't you insist more forcefully on showing your badge?" Brooks leaned back. "Because insisting forcefully gets people killed. I'm a federal agent, but I'm also a realist. I knew the situation was being recorded. I knew backup was coming. I made the tactical decision to comply and let the evidence speak for itself." "Do you believe this stop was racially motivated?" Brooks was quiet for a moment. "I believe Officer Reid made assumptions about me based on how I looked and where I was. Whether that's racial bias or just bad policing, I'll let the investigation decide. What I know for certain is that it was illegal." Nguyen closed her notebook. "Agent Brooks, thank you for your cooperation. For what it's worth, you handled this situation better than most trained officers would have." "I appreciate that. But I want you to know something." Brooks leaned forward. "I had the training, I had the badge, I had the legal protection. Most people Reid has pulled over didn't have any of that. I want this investigation to look at his entire record, because I guarantee I'm not the first person he's done this to." Nguyen nodded. "We're already on it." The investigation took 4 months. Nguyen's team interviewed 37 people. They reviewed Reid's entire service record. They pulled records from every traffic stop he'd conducted in the past 3 years. They found a pattern. 62% of Reid stops involved drivers of color, despite the city's demographics being 40% minority. 38% of his searches were conducted without clear probable cause. 15 people had filed complaints that were dismissed or downplayed by the department. The evidence was overwhelming. In October, federal prosecutors filed formal charges: deprivation of rights under color of law, unlawful search and seizure, and making false statements in an official report. Reid had claimed in his incident report that Brooks was acting suspiciously and refused to comply with lawful orders. The videos proved both statements were lies.
Reid's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal. The prosecutors refused. This case was going to trial. Do you think the investigation went far enough, or should the entire department have been held accountable? Share your thoughts below. The trial lasted 8 days. The prosecution's case was simple and devastating. They played the videos, all of them. Margaret Halford's footage, Reid's body camera, Chen's body camera, Diaz's dash cam. 12 minutes of clear, undeniable evidence.
They called Alan Brooks to the stand. Brooks walked to the witness box in a dark suit, his federal badge visible on his belt. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney David Kern, started with the basics. Agent Brooks, can you describe what you were doing on the morning of the incident? I was driving to a briefing at our field office. I was following all traffic laws. I wasn't speeding. I wasn't using my phone. I was simply driving. When Officer Reid pulled you over, what was your first thought? Confusion. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, but I'd been trained to comply with lawful orders, so I pulled over immediately. What did Officer Reid say to you? He asked what I was doing in that neighborhood. Not about a traffic violation, not about my license. He wanted to know why I was there. How did you respond? I identified myself as a federal agent and asked permission to retrieve my credentials. He refused and ordered me out of the vehicle. Did you comply? Yes, I complied with every order he gave, even though I knew the stop was unlawful. Why didn't you refuse? Brooks looked directly at the jury. Because refusing gets people hurt or killed. I made the decision to comply, document everything, and pursue accountability through the legal system. That's what I'm trained to do. Did you consent to the search of your vehicle? No, I explicitly stated multiple times that I did not consent. What happened when Officer Reid found your badge? Brooks paused. He realized he'd made a mistake, but by then it was too late. The damage was done. Reid's defense attorney, Thomas Garrett, tried to paint a different picture. He argued that Reid was following his training, that he felt the situation was suspicious, that he had a right to ensure officer safety. But when Garrett cross-examined Brooks, it fell apart. Agent Brooks, isn't it true that you could have been more cooperative? I was completely cooperative. I complied with every lawful order. But you refused to exit the vehicle initially. No, I asked permission to show my credentials first. That's not refusal, that's procedure. Couldn't Officer Reid have reasonably believed you were a threat? Brooks stared at him. I was sitting in my car with my hands visible. I identified myself calmly and clearly. I made no threatening moves. Nothing I did warranted the response I received. Garrett had no answer for that. Officers Chen and Diaz testified next. Both of them confirmed that Reid had violated protocol. Both of them stated they'd tried to stop him. Both of them made it clear that Brooks had done nothing wrong. Margaret Halford testified about what she saw. Her voice shook slightly, but her account was clear. I watched that officer treat a man like a criminal for no reason. And when I saw him search that car without permission, I knew someone needed to see this. Because without that video, no one would have believed it happened. The prosecution rested.
Reid's defense called character witnesses, fellow officers who said Reid was a good cop, neighbors who said he was a good man. His attorney argued that one mistake shouldn't define a career. But the jury didn't see one mistake. They saw a pattern. They saw the complaints. They saw the unlawful stop. They saw the illegal search. They saw a man who believed his badge gave him the right to violate someone's constitutional rights. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned, guilty on all counts. Reid sat motionless as the verdict was read. His face was blank, emotionless, but his hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Helen Ortiz didn't mince words. Mr. Reid, you were given a badge and a duty to protect and serve. Instead, you used that badge as a weapon. You profiled an innocent man. You denied him his rights. You violated the law you swore to uphold. And when confronted with the truth, you lied about it in an official report. She paused, looking down at him from the bench. This court cannot and will not tolerate abuse of authority. The community trusts law enforcement to act with integrity. You betrayed that trust. Reid was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release. He was also permanently barred from working in law enforcement. Alan Brooks attended the sentencing. He sat in the back of the courtroom, quiet and composed. When it was over, reporters tried to get a statement from him. He kept it brief. Justice was served today, but this case should remind us that accountability only works when there's evidence. I had cameras recording. I had backup officers who told the truth. I had the resources to fight back. Not everyone does. We need to remember that. He walked away before they could ask anything else. Back in Sterling, the police department implemented new policies: mandatory de-escalation training, stricter oversight on traffic stops, body cameras that couldn't be turned off, and a commitment to take complaints seriously no matter who filed them. Chief Kolb held a press conference. We failed Agent Brooks. We failed our community. We allowed a pattern of misconduct to continue unchecked. That ends now. Every officer in this department will be held to the highest standard, or they won't be an officer at all. It wasn't enough to undo the damage, but it was a start. Margaret Halford received a commendation from the city council for her courage in recording and sharing the video. She didn't want recognition, but she accepted it with grace. I just did what was right. Anyone else would have done the same. But not everyone would have. And that's the point. Vincent Reid is currently serving his sentence at a federal correctional facility in Pennsylvania. He's eligible for early release in 14 months if he completes a rehabilitation program. Whether he'll learn from this or simply serve his time remains to be seen. Alan Brooks still works for the Federal Protection Agency. He doesn't talk about the case much. He's moved on. But the video of that traffic stop is still online, still being shared, still being used in training sessions for police departments across the country. It's a reminder, a warning, a lesson. Your badge doesn't give you the right to violate someone's rights. Your assumptions don't override the law. And your bias, no matter how deeply you believe it, doesn't justify injustice. So here's the question. Do you think justice was truly served, or should the consequences have been more severe? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story made you think, hit that like button and subscribe. We'll keep bringing you real stories about accountability, justice, and the moments that change everything. Thanks for watching.